The 60s and 70s was a historical period of time for evolving popular culture. During 1960, new technology was being invented. Revolutionary satellite technology made global communication a lot faster, and exchanging of information became rapidly quicker. Fashion was changing and growing from sleek and sophisticated to short dresses and high boots. It was a portion of time when women were finding their voices and realizing that gender equality was imbalanced. Teenagers were breaking away from their parents, and many young people had started to become dissatisfied with the socially acceptable mainstream values, considering them to be shallow and materialistic. One significant change in popular culture was music. There was a large shift in the genres of music. Rock and roll was largely popular in the 1950s and fundamental to laying down a foundation for music artists to alter and change during the 1960s. During the 60s and 70s, popular Australian music was very much dominated by American and English music. Most Australian songs published during this time were a repeat of primarily English hits. Because of its small population at the time, there wasn't as much of an opportunity for Australian artists to make it big. Although it was tough for Aussie singers to find a platform, the ones who did became known by many people. Most of the artists emerging from Australia were boy bands and groups, such as AC/DC and the Bee Gees. Other singers were also becoming quite popular, but quickly lost their large following and were mainly known as being a one-hit wonder. The Australian artists that were producing original pieces of music are still known today and became much more successful than the singers who covered others' music. AC/DC were formed in Sydney, and to present day, AC/DC is still known to be one of the best loved and hardest rocking bands in the world. One particular band, known as the Beatles, not only had a large influence in the radical change of music genres, but also were on a worldwide platform and changed the music industry in many more ways than one. The Beatles were an English rock band that were formed in 1960. They were world-renowned as the most influential part of the era of rock. As musicians, the Beatles recognized that rock and roll can include limitless harmonies and sounds. They proved that there was no barrier with the structure of a song. Their style of music set greater standards for pop singers, not only artistically but also commercially. Their significance on pop culture is still being felt today. They were the drive behind a significant movement known as the British Invasion, which involved bands known as the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Who, and many more popular English music groups. Whilst the Beatles were in the midst of their fame, they started to develop an enormous fan base. The Beatles achieved a popularity and following that was unprecedented in the history of music in England. They became the first recording artists in the world to have a record worth more than $1 million before its release. They became the target of such adoration by their fans that they had to cancel all one-night bookings because of riots in early 1964. Their fans were dedicated and very passionate and amazed by the famous quartet. This craze was known as Beatlemania. This was a first for any musician and was groundbreaking for popular culture. There had never been a frenzy of teenage girls screaming and crying over anyone in show business. This craze is stuck with artists to this day, and boy bands such as One Direction are known to have the same reaction as the Beatles did in the 60s. Their music was relatable and different, and this is what appealed to these teenage girls. The overall outcome and impact that the Beatles made on the pop genre was one that wasn't left unnoticed. They helped songwriters have endless possibilities in the way they produced their songs, discovered new and innovative ideas that changed the sound of pop music and rock music, and have led the path to enormous growth and restructure of the way music can be perceived to an audience. They prove through courage and determination the world can be sculpted to your liking. Artists today still use techniques that the Beatles used in the process of writing music. Music back in the 60s and 70s is still popular today and still has a large following. It was a period of growth for the music industry and has evolved music into something much more. The Beatles also were first to break music records, and this has led songwriters to have a goal to break. Rock and pop music is very much different now to back then, but has still kept some of the same characteristics that artists used in that first period of time. Popular music such as pop rock still dominates the charts today and is being fine-tuned to create pieces of musical art that can continue to astound audiences.